Yep, we
Listen,
live.
I need that Pikachu loyalty. You feel me?
Nah, that nigga was
I'm
down though.
saying, you know.
After he got him together on that, doing the whole thing with not going inside the Pokeball, he had been a loyal friend ever
Hey,
since.
that's all they wanted though. Like, think about that. Everybody else left.
I ain't gonna
Butterfree
lie.
left.
Butterfree did leave.
Like
But
everybody else left.
she left, or he left for her boo. But I ain't even going well though. The whole jump on Pokemon the first movie with my man Ash, and what was it? He got turned to stone.
Yeah.
Bruh, I ain't gonna lie. I was a little kid. I was traumatized. I was in that joint crying, man. I was in that joint crying.
Hey, listen.
When they had the little slow-mo fighting and all of the little GMO Pokemon was going against the real deals, and them jumps were just crying and shit. The little tears was just my man Mewtwo was a G. Hey, but look, Mewtwo was oppressed. Mewtwo was just fighting back, and they was hating on that man. Mewtwo will forever go down as probably the most G Pokemon to ever exist in terms of fighting back humanity. Yeah. My man squatted up, got his whole team together. My man Giovanni put him to work and said, "Nah, we about to take over this jump." I forgot why they decided not to take over. I was rather too much happy ending type of stuff, but it is what it is. We live now, everybody who is in Europe. This is another episode of Eavesdrop. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. We was just having a little conversation about Pokemon. Y'all see we got the mugs. So it inspired a little nostalgia. Go back into Pikachu being super loyal. That's why he said everybody need a Pikachu. But again, this is Eavesdrop, and today, as y'all can see in the title, we are going to be discussing CRT, critical race theory, and is it important or not? There's been a lot of conversation in and around what should be done. Should it be taken out the classroom? Is it irrelevant? You know, we heard a lot of the comments, which we also covered and had a conversation about in terms of Kamala Harris, Tim Scott, your boy Jim Clyburn, my bad, who said that America is not racist. And then, you know, Obama being in the post-racial environment, he comes out this week, I believe, to say that he had some institutional constraints that prevented him from talking about Black people. So we here today to have a discussion around whether or not CRT is important. And is it just full of air? Is it some BS or not? But before we go ahead and get started, I want everybody who is tuned in with us, if you can, please hit the like button. That's something real simple that y'all can do to help us have these conversations, share these conversations so that I can build, we can build, and change the direction of what we talk about. Because what we talk about, a lot of people always talk about what are the solutions. And I like to think that the level of the conversation is a reflection of the community. And so let's get off the drama and let's have these conversations, because we keep crying about, you know, what policy we not getting or what we aren't getting from the political infrastructure, but we want to keep continuing to be apolitical bodies of people. With that being said, can you also hit the share button, share the video? That helps us out as well. It's free, don't cost you nothing. Please go over to YouTube if you're looking at our Facebook, or if you're looking through the actual Instagram itself, please go over, subscribe. That also helps. That goes a long way. We appreciate it, because a lot of these things need to be discussed, need to be had. I know some people may not necessarily see the importance and the value in it now, but it all makes sense. And if you got kids, it should make sense already. But if not, we try to do that job here in terms of making these things relatable back to everyday life. So again, hit the like button, hit the share button, please subscribe. And as we having a conversation, you can comment. We'll be reading off some comments from the good brother Quan. We'll be monitoring those as we had a discussion. And then also, if you want to call in and give your take on what it is, and answer the question, do you think CRT, or do you think we using too much focus on trying to fight the pushback on critical race theory? And just let us know what you think. I would just ask that if you do decide to call in, which I would love, because this is a conversation, this is the discussion. And we definitely would love community input, definitely love smoke. We always say you don't got to necessarily agree with us. Just come up, say your piece. I just ask that all people be respectful. I will be respectful for all of those who have called in. You know that I will not do that. But without further ado, we're going to do the show a little bit different today. We're not going to get into the article first, because I really just want to get into the opinion of, do we think CRT, critical race theory, and the fight for keeping it in schools, because this is being done at the state level at the very moment by a few Republican elected officials. And I just want to know people's raw opinion without, placing any bias on it. Before we get into the articles and what I think. And as y'all see in front of the computer, it's a few books that I'll be referring to and using today as source material, along with articles, to just present my position on why I feel the way that I feel. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start off with you today, Quan. What you feel about this whole critical race theory thing? Is it important? Should we be wasting political capital? Should we be lending our support to push back on this politically? And where do you stand in that fight, man?
So I'm gonna start off my point with everything that they address in terms of the facts within critical race theory. They are correct. They are very correct, and I agree with those points.
Which are?
As far as race being the center of a lot of the issues that we deal with in America. Yes, you can point a line that directly links to race as it pertains to a lot of the institutions and a lot of the issues and a lot of the hierarchies that we deal with in society. So that point is correct. I agree with most of the points that we have in critical race theory. But my issue with critical race theory in terms of implementing this into schools is, first of all, schools, in my opinion, are supposed to be they're supposed to be outcome driven, in my opinion. So my philosophy on education is heavily focused on outcomes.
And you are educated yourself, correct?
Exactly. I teach elementary education, anything from K through 5th grade. My goal is to produce the best human beings that I possibly can produce. I want those human beings that come inside of a classroom to be prepared enough to be able to support a family. My overall issue is, okay, this is good, but we also live in a society where in education right now, we're dealing with teachers having to teach Bill Gates curriculum, which is the Common Core. That takes up at least, and shout out to my educators that might be looking at this, Common Core on an average day, just to hit all of those standards and all of those things, that takes at least 7 to 6 hours out of a day. So if we're going to now say, okay, we got to teach Bill Gates curriculum, we got to teach critical race theory. Oh, by the way, we got to teach Asian Pacific Islanders because they're campaigning for their education to be also put into the mainstream education of society. Where is the time for all of these things? Especially considering where Bill Gates has monopolized the educational time. Go into a classroom. We're not teaching half of the stuff that an average kid, not even breaking it down by race. We're not teaching half the stuff that an average kid needs to know in this society in order to be successful. You know what are some of the things that we could be teaching kids?
What?
We could be teaching kids coding, which is proven. There's a proven background for the jobs that are being produced today and tomorrow that will need coding as a prerequisite. We could be teaching kids personal finance. How many adults get out in life and be like, damn, I wish I knew how insurance worked, or I wish I knew how taxes work. I had to, case in point, I had to go to college and get into debt just to be taught the personal finance aspect of how debt works. That's backwards. That could be taught in high school classes. There's a direct line of, hey, if I know personal finance, I could take that skill and I could get a job. Algorithms. I read something the other day. They're going to start using algorithms in hospitals as a means to keeping data and using data as a way to further serve those patients that have reoccurring issues. That's something that could be taught in the classrooms. So I'm not saying critical race theory isn't needed, but I'm gonna pose the question to you. What job in the next 15 to 20 years do you think critical race theory is going to produce? Because the jobs, the things that I just set on you, coding, personal finance, algorithms, all of these things are going to produce jobs for these children. What job will critical race theory produce for a Black kid in our community?
So I don't necessarily or particularly think critical race theory will present and create jobs per se, but what I will say is that in understanding how race works and understanding how to navigate certain environments, that when you understand the lay of the land and the terrain, you can matriculate a lot better. For example, myself, right? I never believed in meritocracy, whether it been, again, you know me since I was in Hart. Blue. I've never believed in meritocracy, and I always understood the social paradigm to be more powerful in that way. So I think that when you teach critical race theory, one, I don't think that this conversation has really been focused on K through 12. I think the GOP has used it as a cultural war to build social and political capital in and around from their base, being the base in which we know they are.
Oh, yeah.
The insurrectionists, the people who, again, are in a line and would love to not have to reckon with a lot of the things that America does and has done as it pertains to the issues where you talk about, for example, teaching coding. One of the issues with that is when you talk about critical race theory being not necessarily taught, but understanding that the reason why a Black child, African-American child, ADOS child can't necessarily exist in that space in the same way is because they don't have access to the same resources, not based on individual sets of decisions, but rather an institutional impact that has occurred and accrued over time. I personally don't necessarily believe that the conversation is being had in and around it is a thorough one, or I would say not even a thorough one, because I think people do understand critical race theory very thoroughly. I think we are highly aware, highly acute, but I don't think people are understanding how the political infrastructure is weaponizing it. So I can respect you coming from a educational background in terms of having that critique on it, because I would agree to the extent that we should be teaching people tangible things that allow them to individually empower themselves in their day-to-day lives, that will allow them to produce better outcomes no matter what circumstances may be placed upon them. Because if it's not race, it would definitely be another thing. But it just so happened that unfortunately, for us, race is the most impactful thing. And I will stand on that. I will stand on that square in terms of not having certain access and not being able to matriculate in the same ways that other groups can.
Above wealth?
Above wealth, because race, when you talk about race, in which we'll get into, and the absence of wealth is directly tied to race.
I see what you're saying.
So when a person doesn't necessarily have access, that lack of access is directly tied to lack of wealth and directly tied to the decimation of wealth. Today, I believe they're doing a series of events around the Tulsa race massacre. And it's unfortunate that they're talking about doing reparations for that one specific incident. But what we have to understand is not only were those individual white people acting to be on their own behalf, but it was also state sanctioned, government sanctioned. So when we talk about government empowering people to gut and decimate the wealth of a group of people, we have to look at it in a more holistic way, because I think critical race theory is important, because without it, for me, it'll be game, set, match. We're going to get into that later, but it'll be game, set, match, because it'll further allow dummies like Kamala Harris or Tim Scott and people like Jim Clyburn to come out and say America isn't racist. And I don't want to say dummy. I take that back. They're not dumb. They're just complicit in forwarding a narrative that America would love to believe that they have achieved. But they haven't, because if we just want to go by Obama's words, the first quote unquote Black president, which he wasn't, but if we're going to go by his words, he had, what was his words? Institutional constraints, not individual, institutional constraints. Not individual people saying to him, oh, you can't do this, but we understand that institutions make up a body of individuals. So there's a number of people, there are policies in place, there are different standards in place that doesn't allow you. And again, I'm just using Obama's words for the sake of using his words. I don't believe it to be true, but if we're going to use the words, let's use the words. He had institutional constraints. Let's dig into that. Those institutional constraints come in the form of policy. And I think critical race theory, because what we'll get into later, because it's derived from a legal framework, it's important that we understand that it's attached directly to policy, and the GOP, in the fashion that they are strategic and that they are, you know me, I respect the GOP. And you want to know why? Because of things just like this. They've hijacked something and blown it up. And now we're having a cultural war when Biden, Democrats have the House, Senate, and the White House, and haven't done anything to address any of these issues that we're talking about. So my question to people is, are you upset because it's the Republicans? And I'm not saying that to everybody. I know there's some people out there that are objective, but are we upset for the most part because it's the Republicans doing it? Because last time I checked, nobody checked anybody when we say race doesn't exist, or when we place the blame or place the onus on the individual, which I think that there is some room to do that, because we also have to recognize in ourselves, again, we continue to do the same things. Like I said, I do this because the conversations that a community has is a reflection of where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So if all we do is chase drama, and bullshit, and entertainment, that's a reflection of us. We can't continue to blame. What I will agree with, we can't continue to blame white people, Republicans, or whoever, and say, oh, well, they're doing this, or they're pushing this narrative. Black people, African-American people, those people have enough agency to say, you know what? Like we said in the last show, I will sacrifice that gig for not capitulating to an actual institution that has the protocol set in place to constrain the first Black president.
So for me, when I look at critical race theory and I look at it and I study all of the things that they go through, my position is, what is the role that parents fall in educating their kids about the basics of critical race theory? And I would understand it more if this was something new or if these concepts have never been explored before. But we have a history, a long, rich history of the elder generations of our communities letting their children know that, motherfucker, this is a white man's world. And this is how it operates. And this is where you are. And this is what you need to do in this white man's world in order to make it. And for me, if you're asking an educator who has 8 hours of the day to now have to teach your child something that traditionally was taught in your household, that's a failure on family. That's a failure on family. And here's the issue. It's not the poor families, because we live it. You can't walk outside your door in a poor community and not see critical race theory at work.
This is true.
It's the families that are in close proximities with the people with the wealth that aren't having these conversations with their kids. They're telling their kids that they're white, or they're presenting as such.
Yeah, and Kristen Green said it's not just about jobs, and I would agree. It's not just about jobs. Like I said, it is about navigating and being able to matriculate. But I do agree, I sit in the middle on this, because I do agree that if you teach that in your home, you can circumvent and allow your child to be taught a lot of different things. But I don't even think a lot of this discussion, a lot of the bills being passed will impact it in the way that we think it will, because America has never taught true history.
Oh, yeah.
But what I will say is, politically, and the reason why I say it's game, set, match, is because I do believe that once you put that legal precedent in place, that it allows people who are nefarious to get away with murder. Because again, what we'll get into a little bit later is, if you do put it on the books that you can't teach critical race theory, and because the policy is vague in its current form, does that mean that you can't teach about the Tulsa race massacres? Does that mean that you can't teach about Audre Lorde? Does that mean that you can't teach about Fannie Lou Hamer? Because all of those things are a part of critical race theory because of how they impacted the whole group. Though it's not illegal, though critical race theory is not something that can get you a job, critical race theory is directly attached to history. Those things are interwoven. Mm-hmm. And that's where the problem comes in for me. Because when you have a concept that's built around a framework of history through legal precedents, when you ban that, now again, you get to say that America isn't racist. Why? Because individual accounts of racism is not the same thing as systemic racism, redlining, etc. Somebody calling you a nigga is not the same thing as you being affected and targeted by a government.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But if you cannot teach how you were targeted by government, that's my problem. That's where I have the issue. Because from my seat, I'm a political person. Mm-hmm. And I see the move. I see the dagger that they're trying to stick in moving into this fake post-racial society. Mm-hmm. But like I said, we didn't do the first go ahead.
Can I give you one more point? Uh-huh. So we also have to face a few realities as well. Most educators in America, unfortunately, do not resemble me. I could teach the fuck out of some critical race theory. But if I had to give a percentage of Black males that are actually in classrooms, you might could count them in one hand, just a percentage. If I had to give a percentage of just Black people in general that make up the education population across this nation, it's probably in the low to mid teens. So what we are effectively doing, in my opinion, is we're tasking majority white educators, we're advocating that responsibility onto them to teach something that they don't even really know or understand themselves. And then think about some of the things that they are having to teach their kids.
But that's what we want them to be uncomfortable, in an uncomfortable space, because that's where the progress is. Because again, part of the reason why they don't know it is because of the leisure, the leisure that they've had in not being able or not having to actually address the atrocities of the past.
Yeah, but think about what kind of environment that creates. You know how things work.
You know what? Hold that thought, right? Because we're going to get there. While everybody watching who tuning in right now, please like the video, share the video, comment. If you want our Facebook, please join us on the YouTube. If you want our Instagram, please join us on the YouTube. That way I can engage you better. If you are watching and you want to call in and you want to give your opinion, just allow us to get through the set and I'll bring you up. You'll be in a waiting room and we can definitely have a conversation. Again, you can sit on any side of the spectrum. I just really would love to hear people's opinions, but please like the video, share the video, subscribe. We definitely appreciate that over here at Gilded Sages. It helps us out a little bit, but we're going to get into this article because for those who may not necessarily be aware, I want to go into first what is critical race theory and why it is under attack, right? So this is an article from Stephen Salchuk, Education Week, and we're going to go down. And so what is critical race theory anyway? Critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that racism is a social construct and that it is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, like I said, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. The basic tenets of critical race theory, or CRT, emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 1970s and early 1980s, created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, among others. A good example of critical race theory, in the 1930s, government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed for poor financial risk, often explicitly due to the racial composition of its inhabitants. Banks subsequently refused to offer mortgages to Black people in those areas, aka redlining. Today, those same patterns of discrimination live on through facially race-blind policies like single-family zoning that prevents the building of affordable housing in advantaged majority white neighborhoods and thus stymies racial desegregation efforts. Because as we all know, America is still desegregated despite the laws, because when we have a conversation about the de facto versus the de jure, just because you put the law in place does not mean that the behavior will change unless there is a penalty or an incentive to deter that behavior. Hence why the Asians went after a crime bill and didn't say, like the Black community says, oh, well, we don't do policy, we don't do politics. No, we need that because we want to deter behavior as much as possible to get favorable outcomes, as you mentioned earlier, sir. The politics has outcomes, right? And so today, those same patrons of discrimination live on through, oh, I'm sorry, I read that. CRT also has ties to other intellectual currents, including the work of sociologists and literary theorists who studied links between social power, social organization, and language. And its ideas have since informed other fields like the humanities, the social sciences, and teacher education. This academic understanding of critical race theory differs from representation in recent popular books, and especially from its betrayal by critics, often, though not exclusively, conservative Republicans. Critics charge that the theory leads to negative dynamics, such as a focus on group identity over universality. Shared traits divides people into oppressed and oppressor groups and urges intolerance. Thus, there is a good deal of confusion over what CRT means, as well as its relationship to other terms like anti-racism and social justice, with which it is often conflated. And social justice warriors are a completely different thing. Don't ever conflate that with it. And we'll get into that. To an extent, the term critical race theory is now cited as the basis of all diversity and inclusion efforts, regardless of how much it's actually informed those programs. One conservative organization, the Heritage Foundation, recently attributed a whole host of issues to CRT, including the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, LGBTQ clubs in schools, diversity training in federal agencies and organizations, California's recent ethnic studies, modeled curriculum, the free speech debate on college campuses, and alternatives to exclusionary discipline. I'm gonna stop there a little bit. I'm gonna give a little brief monologue because I want everybody to know and understand that critical race theory is not about diversity and inclusion. Critical race theory is directly tied to the legal precedents set in America that have everything to do with Black Americans, ADOS, African Americans, the American Negro, and the suffrage that we have suffered, because as I always say on this show, that POCs, BIPOC, whatever they want to call themselves, are casualties of a war, of a institution that has already been set in place. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to make the point that all diversity, LGBTQ, and other initiatives are not directly tied to. It's just that unfortunately people have hijacked our narrative, our intellectual property for their own political advancement, because it's not the same. Don't ever get it confused. As we continue, does critical race theory says all white people are racist? And this is to debunk the whole, it is about calling out people and isolating people. And this is just, again, white people not wanting to necessarily be accountable for the nation. This is also trying to hold Black people accountable for how they continue to participate in it. This is also how POC people continue to participate in it. Because if you understand critical race theory, and we'll get into later as you see the book Racecraft, you don't have to be racist or white to perpetuate racism. So all of that Black people can't be racist nonsense that everybody keeps saying, cut it out and cut it out. And if you want to go ahead and argue me on it, because I know a lot of people feel that way, you can definitely be a tool of racism. You could definitely perpetuate it, and you could definitely fall into the same behavior patterns and default into the dominant group ideologically. I welcome any smoke on that because I'm tired of hearing it. We can be racist. And when I say we can be racist, we can be anti-Black, anti-ADOS, anti-African-American, because that's part of how we matriculate. But that's on another note. Some critics claim that the theory advocates discriminating against white people in order to achieve equity. They mainly aim those accusations at theorists who advocate for policies that explicitly take race into account. All these different ideas grow out of long-standing, tenacious intellectual debates. Critical race theory emerged out of postmodernist thought, which tends to be skeptical of the idea of universal values, objective knowledge, individual merit, enlightenment, rationalism, and liberalism, tenets that conservatives tend to hold dear. Interesting. We get into that. I agree with a lot of those tenets, but we have to get out of race first, because we still using terms like Black and white. And to your first conversation, Quan, what does any of this have to do with K through 12? Scholars who study critical race theory and education look at how policies and practices in K-12 education contribute to persistent racial inequalities in education and advocate for ways to change them. Among the topics they've studied, racially segregated schools, the underfunding of majority Black and Latino school districts, disproportionate disciplining of Black students, barriers to gifted programs, and selective admission to high schools and curricula that reinforce racist ideas. Thus, much of the current debate appears to spring not from the academic text, but the fear among the critics that students, especially white students, will be exposed to supposedly damaging or self-demoralizing ideas, similar to the self-demoralizing ideas that Black kids face because of the counter-narrative, which we'll get into.
And we ain't even got to go to school to face them.
While some school district officials have issued mission statements, resolutions, or spoken about changes in their policies using some of the discourse of CRT, it is not clear to what degree educators are explicitly teaching the concepts or even using curriculum materials or other methods that implicitly draw on them. So I want to stop there, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is touch on a few points before I pass the buck off to you, Quan. So shout out to Nicole Hannah-Jones, who got her ass rejected from speaking on race and speaking on the inequities and the foundation of race. And like I told you, when you do that, you will become a leper to all institutions. Why? Because I'm tired of people giving plausible deniability and benefit of the doubt to people who have vested interest in keeping us where we are. But again, the critiques of the GOP is more centered and anchored in and around people or white people specifically being in a position where they're being taught about how not them individually, but their ancestors, AKA Joe Biden, who was at the Hang 'em High parties, who was writing policies, who that actually defamed, because defame, you got to create the narrative. Because when you talk about making policy, you got to create the narrative to sell the policy. So Joe Biden created the narrative that we were super thugs, that we were animals on the floor to sell policies that incentivize businesses to keep us where we are. And so now the GOP, his buddies, who he loves so much, are saying, we don't want our kids to have to learn about themselves or their parents or again, for all I know, Joe Biden is behind all of this because he don't want his kids to have to know how he, through policy, not individual accounts, impacted. So like the article, nobody's talking about, and I say this all of the time, nobody's talking about individual acts of racism. This is much more and much bigger than somebody calling you a nigger. This is much bigger than that. But again, because our group is apolitical and anti-policy, we just want to bitch. We want to bitch about policy. We want to bitch about what we don't get from the political institutions. At the same time, be apolitical though. But what will anybody tell you? Whatever you want, you need to be in that space, right? Yep. If you want money, you need to be in the space of business. If you want education, you need to be in the space of education. But somehow, we think that we could be apolitical and get policy. Don't work like that. So, also, I want to make a note that when we talk about critical race theory, Latinos are not a part of that. And we're going to get into that later. Because when we talk about legal precedent, Asians, Native Americans, Latinos were all classified as white and fought for the classification to be white. That's no smoke and that's no hatred towards y'all group, because I know how y'all social justice warriors and everybody want to be fake outraged and everybody want to be fake offended. Y'all groups, y'all parents fought for whiteness. And that's why I brought the book out here. I hope everybody check it out. Working Toward Whiteness. Please get it, because I'm tired of everybody doing this fake stuff. And the only reason that it hasn't been stopped is because African Americans are retarded. Kwame Brown said it best. What am I talking about being African? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Black and brown. You can have your own plights, but those plights are not the same. And when we talk about critical race theory has nothing to do with any other group, because all of the legal precedents to marginalize have been around one specific group, and everybody else has been a casualty of war as a result. Again, let's take it again. Mr. Biden himself, war on drugs was targeted towards the African-American community. Am I saying that no Latinos as a byproduct got locked up as a result? Not saying it at all.
Look at the prison population numbers.
You absolutely got caught up in it. But who was it targeted to? It's like any other marketing plan. Everybody want to fake like they understand business and marketing. But guess what? If you understand business and marketing, you can have a target audience. You can have a target. But guess what? Other people will fall into that catch. Policy is the same way. So I want everybody to understand LGBTQ, all of this other stuff, all of these things, feminism that people want to attach into, because again, that's the co-opting of intersectionality. Because I respect intersectionality in the theory, in theory, and this is what politicians deal with. Because y'all academics can do all of y'all theory, but the way it's been co-opted though, intersectionality, because if we really want to be real, everybody want to talk about every single other group, but I ain't never heard nobody talk about the damage, the lacerations of heterosexual Black males. Not once. And you want to know why? Because they know heterosexual Black males ain't really rocking for a lot of the bullshit that they be putting out here. So we don't hear that. We don't hear that group get analyzed. Because if we did, it's game, set, match. The whole game is over. Because guess what? Black women would get off feminism because they would understand that, like you said, family is the first political institution. Family, a series of families, builds a community. But wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Systemically, heterosexual males have been targeted. Everybody loves Tariq Nasheed. Shout out to his buck breaking film. It's information that you could just look up, but let's have a conversation about it. Black heterosexual males have been targeted through direct violence, through economic violence, social. When we talk about isolation, Have people overcome? I'm not talking to the anomalies. Please don't hop in here being an anomaly right now. A bunch of people are anomalies, but we're talking about the majority. I need us to be grown up about this. Because when we talk about that, and we talk about the literacy rates, and we talk about all of those different things, guess what? Black women, your families are being fucked over. While you're also being fucked over. It's why you're so tired. It's why you're so hurt. It's why you feel unprotected. It's why you feel all of those things. Because guess what? The people who were supposed to protect you are also getting fucked up. And those of us who are willing to stand up and say something, what happens? Get your ass murdered. Because all America is good at is either systemically addressing you, and if you circumvent all of that and actually still get to the people,
but then that we just gotta do what we do best.
Put a bullet in you.
In America.
But from that article, what did you take from the article in terms of, them talking about single family zoning, how zoning impacts us, and it being more about not teaching it, but anchoring it in getting people in institutions to understand how their policies and the policies from the hill, from the hood to everywhere else influence the outcomes.
So like I said before, my caveat when I started was I agree tenfold with everything critical race theory has to say in terms of how it plays out in society and who it impacts and all of those things. So I agree that there needs to be some way that this information can be disseminated out to us so that more people can be informed about it. My only premise is in my humble opinion, this should be taught to the adults so that the adults can teach the children.
But it's geared in this, and that's the thing. Like they said, the GOP hijacked it, bro. Because all of this critical race theory is for adults. It's collegiate level material.
Exactly.
They aren't teaching critical race theory in schools. Never have they.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Kids can't comprehend at that level at that point.
Exactly. I see what you're saying.
They hijacked it and made it a cultural war political issue.
Oh, got you. So yeah, if we're talking about adults, then yes, every adult should understand and know critical race theory. But some of these things, and here's my ultimate issue. Some of these things we need to get into the mindset of educating ourselves on, because we gotta stop depending on institutions to do this work for us. Because when you depend on an institution, time and time again, what have institutions shown to do for Black people throughout our history?
Nothing.
Exactly. So why are we running to institutions to teach us about our own history and struggles?
So I'll say this, I agree with you. We shouldn't run to institutions to teach us about our own history. But what I will tell everybody in this jump, because everybody love to talk about, oh, what's the solutions? I would say pick an institution, one or two. And like I said last time, pick 2 institutions, pick 3 meetings, join one, preferably. Shout out to DC Young Democrats, help us out because I'm trying to create a nation within a nation. So yeah, I get it. Democrats, you can feel how you feel. Also, Gilded Sages, that's why I'm doing this, to catch all of the people in the middle who don't want to do electoral politics, who don't want to get caught up in being in partisan politics. I get it, I understand it. I'm more of an independent thinker. I'm registered as a Democrat, but you know me personally, look, it is what it is. Y'all can say what y'all want about me, but at the same time, I go into institutions not for them to teach me. I teach myself. Luckily, I come from a family with a rich history. Again, my grandmother pushing 90. So I know and I have the books, the contents, the oral history, and all of those things. So I enter in black first, black male second. So that's how we need to be entering these institutions. That's the solution. Don't go in here, all of these black people who, oh, I'm a Democrat. Who cares?
Exactly. And here's my final. When I look at this book right here, how much did this book run you?
What, like 15, 20?
$15, $20 will teach you about whiteness in America.
Nah, people working towards whiteness and how whiteness isn't necessarily about race, but about actual being normalized and being accepted and not targeted.
Exactly.
Systemically.
So you would learn all of that in just this one book. We got Death of a Nigga Boy.
Shout out to me.
How much would this book run you?
16, and that's in the link below. And I bought Death of a Nigga Boy. I'm gonna get into that, but I wanted to clear up some stuff before we move on, because I know all of the fake social justice warriors, and y'all can clip it how you want to. Please bring the mother smoke. All of the description is down below. Get the Zoom. I'm gonna pull up this article though, because I know they're gonna have smoke about the Latino thing. So on the census, who checks Hispanic, who checks white, and why? So little brief. Again, all this stuff is in the link below if you want to check me on anything. On the history of Hispanic on the census questionnaire. In 1930, Mexican was put on the census questionnaire as a race. This was during the Depression, and it was a time period when the government was rounding up people. They used the census in the 1940s to locate Japanese Americans for internment camps. Ooh, yeah, so people didn't want to be identifiable on a census because they were afraid of the government. Today, everyone wants to be counted. Now everyone wants representation. But at that time period, people did not want that. And they also said they did not want to be racialized. Again, AKA, I don't want to be
black.
This was at a time where the best avenue for people was to fit in, was to claim whiteness. In 1929, the League of the United Latin American Citizens, a Mexican organization formed in Corpus Christi, Texas, one of their main organizing efforts was to get Mexican off the 1930 census. They protested, "We are white race. We are Americans." The Mexican government itself protested the category because the entire Southwest used to be part of Mexico. And when it was taken over by the United States, they promised Mexico that the Mexican residents there will be treated as full citizens, not 2/3 like the Negroes. Not 2/3 like the Negroes. And that was for, again, Asian Americans, Native Americans, everybody was counted as white. So all of that smoke, all of that stuff about y'all been suffering the same way, I ain't saying y'all ain't suffered, but let's stop the games. Let's stop it, please. Yeah. Nobody has had the same plight. Because again, y'all understood what it meant to be racialized. So let's stop. I just wanted to drop that in there. Oh, yeah. But again, Death of a Nigga Boy. Check that out. Yeah. Boom. Because also, when we talk about that, it's a page in here that I wanted to touch on tonight. American Policy Initiatives on page 29, if you happen to have it. You can go to your politics and pros. The link is in the description below. So, Black Codes, 1865, New Deal. Because while we're talking about policies that were targeted against us, we also have to talk about the policies that we were excluded from. The New Deal. So when you hear AOC talking about the New Deal, ask AOC how they want to actually create a New Deal first that redresses the fact that African Americans, ADOS community, didn't get that. Redlining. Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a part of World War II, where Nazis were sought out by American government in trade for, guess what? Their scientific progressions that the Nazis were working on. And they colluded. So all of that whole fake we anti-Nazi talk needs to stop. Homestead Act, gerrymandering, convict leasing, mass incarceration, the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan. Shout out to Kevin Samuels. He did a video the other day on Birth of a Nation. Everybody love drama, but don't nobody want to check him out when he's talking about politics though. COINTELPRO, slave codes, the Manumissions Act, the GI Bill, affirmative action, predatory lending. We can go on and we can go on, but we all know.
Exactly. And just to continue my point, we got our last book right here, Racecraft. What I say this to say is there's a wealth of just information out there that people could tap into that you would not need an institution at all. You could bypass the institution and get the knowledge straight from the source.
Teach it in your house.
Exactly.
I teach my
but what we want to do, this is what we want to do.
Is be lazy.
We want to claim we don't have no time. We don't have no time. We don't have no time. But it's grown people during the hours of 8 to 3 that are on social media writing paragraphs underneath somebody's comment section, scrolling for hours.
Yeah, my son getting hip.
Watching Netflix and whatever shows for hours, finishing whole seasons. I can't get through a show because I got so much stuff that I got to do.
And again,
this is what we make our time for, and we wonder why things are the way they are. So that's why I say there was a rich history of this being taught in the home. The silent generation taught the boomers these things in their home. They knew it was a white man's world. They knew critical race theory existed, and they taught them how to navigate. Where and why did we drop the ball on educating our own? We don't even talk to our kids. They be in the other room playing the damn game. So yeah, I can go out here and I can do all, but no. If we not gonna campaign against the Common Core and goddamn Bill Gates is bullshit curriculum, then teachers don't have the time to really teach this properly at any level.
Yeah, and I want to get into something before I get into the book, Racecraft, and we finish out. I just wanted to touch on because I keep saying the GOP hijack.
Yeah.
And I want to provide a little bit of context for that. Teachers say law banning critical race theory are putting a chill on their lessons. As Republican lawmakers across the country advance state bills that will limit how public school teachers can discuss race in their classrooms, educators say the efforts are already having a chilling effect on their lessons. In recent weeks, Republican legislators in roughly half a dozen states have adopted or advanced bills purporting to take aim at the teaching of critical race theory and an academic approach that examines how race and racism function in law and society. Again, this is not a conversation about individual accounts of racism. Mm-hmm. So if you are a white person, I do not need you to be on your social justice warrior tip and be offended. This is a conversation because, as we discussed earlier, this is about holding everybody accountable, because guess what? Law is blind to race. They are words on paper. They dictate behavior. That's what they do. And in dictating that behavior, they produce outcomes. And so again, like we have talked here about, even when you have black flight is responsible for the communities being dilapidated in the way that they are. And that's black people inflicting and participating in racism in the same way that white people do it. But because they think that they black, they don't think they can be racist. In reality, though, the bills many Republicans have proposed do not directly address critical race theory. Instead, many ban the teaching of concepts that educators say they don't teach anyway. Like I said, they're not teaching that stuff anyway, bro.
Pretty much. Because
it's high-level thinking. I wouldn't say high-level thinking, but because people can think. Don't give me, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's it's material that isn't meant for kids. It's layered concepts. It's heavy material.
And it's not a part of the regular curriculum. That's
exactly. Critical race theory is a whole curriculum in itself. Like I went to school for political science and stuff like that. So it's has nothing to do with K through 12. Like you can learn history. And that's my biggest thing is like, I don't want the history to be diverted as a result of this.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And so a bill signed into law by Oklahoma, Kevin Stent, bans lessons that includes the concept that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. That's already illegal. That a person's moral character is inherently determined by his race or sex, or that someone should feel discomfort, guilt, or distress on account or race or on their race or sex. And that's where we get real vague.
Yeah, that discomfort. I hate that
discomfort, guilt.
Oh, I hate this
because we can stop there, but that's where it when people start using little vague language like that, it's like, because again, what merits discomfort? And if a person is discomfort and uncomfortable, the whole point of addressing race is people being uncomfortable.
I hate the word uncomfortable. Nigga, I've taken uncomfortable shits. Like, what are we talking about? Uncomfortable. What are we talking about? Like, nah,
But that's where it gets tricky, because it's like, can you have a conversation? Look, can you even have a conversation about Fred Hampton? We just saw the whole Fred Hampton movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you really break it down to people that, oh, I ain't even talking about race, but let's talk about how government, through COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, he still got his name on the building on Pennsylvania Ave, right across from the Wilson building.
Mm-hmm.
Shane went, murdered this man in his bed, cold blood. That's uncomfortable, even for me.
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable. So do you teach that or do you not teach that now? Can you teach that or can you not teach that now? Because if you put it in context, during that time, white people dominated government. They still do.
Yeah.
Now we can't speak about reality. And that's where, for me, it's like, you can get real jiggy with that. As a politico, as a person in politics who wants to control a narrative and continue dominating and continue indoctrinating.
But for me, it's always been that type of time when it came to just institutions, period.
But that's the thing, though.
It's always been.
But that's the thing. If the people don't know they're being indoctrinated falsely through that, through omission. What do I always say to you, bro? In politics, it's not about what people say, it's about what we omit.
Yeah.
You're dealing with highly intellectual people.
Yeah.
It's about what we omit. Because everybody think they know. You're dealing with people who have, again, understand the industry.
Yeah.
Understand what a clearance is. A clearance is a check and a balance on what we call the intelligence industry. So we have an intelligence community, right? CIA, FBI, elected officials. If your business, so you Elon Musk, you Jeff Bezos, you Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, you get in the fold. Why? Because your business has reached such an extent that you have entrenched on government terrain, and you have entrenched on the daily lives of people, so much so that you got to get a clearance because we got to keep tabs on you. So, with that being said, it's a whole industry around intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So I need people to understand what you think you know, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
And that's even for me.
That's
as a low ass grunt. What you think you know, you don't know.
Yeah.
These people have access to so much information. Institutions. You could call an expert on the spot. Take his information. Again, intersectionality. Take all of that theory and weaponize it politically. And who's to know better? Only people who know better is people who think and people who have conspiracies. Because those are the thinking people. And that's why us as politicos, people who think and people who have conspiracies, we get their ass out the way. Seriously.
They be the first to go.
First to go. You thinking too much. I don't need you questioning me. Or if you good, I'll pay you some money.
Yeah, you get bought out. You know, you get the bag.
What's up?
So it's either the bag or the bullet. Which one?
That's what tenure is. What you want to do? And you want this tenure?
And our Negroes can't get it. So what?
You want this tenure? You gonna keep quiet? You gonna, hey, what's up? But it is what it is, man. Hit the like button, hit the share button, man. If y'all want to join in the conversation, everything is in the link in the description below. Y'all can hop on the Zoom. This is, again, free thought. You don't gotta agree with a goddamn thing I'm saying. I appreciate the dialogue and the discourse. I'm not here about echo chambers. I actually hate echo chambers. This is why I'm doing this. Because I'm tired of the echo chamber. I'm tired of everybody disagreeing with everybody every single day. That's dumb.
We ain't no go along, get along game.
Nah.
Like my man said.
Get your motherfucking mom's cookie.
Yeah.
Oh, but nah. All right, yeah, do that, please. And what we gonna do, Racecraft, man, if you don't have this, go check it out. Shout out to Yvette Carnell. Shout out to Antonio Moore, because that's how I came into this book, being fully transparent. They have a book registrar. And so shout out to ADOS as a whole, because that was definitely clutch. I picked it up, but I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna first little things that I let me see, just some. And I thought the quote was interesting too on the back from Ta-Nehisi Coates, because y'all love him. It's not just a challenge to racists. It's a challenge to people like me. It's a challenge to African Americans who have accepted the fact of race and define themselves by the concept of race.
Yeah.
That's what this book dispels.
Yeah, because I was gonna get into like, hey, listen.
That's why I want to disaggregate everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not black. It should be no blackness. It should be no whiteness.
Yeah, because it's too many people that I don't know where they come from, but all they know is race.
That's it.
I'm like, now who is this person?
So we get into it. And it's like a series of conversations. It's an interesting book. So it says the disorder engendered by racecraft did not end with Jim Crow. What better typifies it than being killed by mistake, as happened not long ago to Afro-American police officer? While pursuing a car thief, the officer was shot to death by a white brother officer who took him for a criminal. The instant inevitable, but upon examination, bizarre diagnosis of many people is that Black officers in such situations have been killed because of their skin color. But has their skin color killed them? If so, why does the skin color of white officers not kill them in the same way? Question asked. Why do Black officers not mistake white officers for criminals and blaze away, even when white officers are dressed to look like street toughs, aka thugs? Everyone has skin color, but not everyone's skin color counts as race, let alone as evidence of criminal conduct. The missing step between someone's physical appearance and an invidious outcome is the practice of a double standard. In a word, racism. It was his fellow officer, not his skin color, that caused the Black officer's death. Even so, the fellow officer was devastated by his error and fatal consequence. His grief and that of the white officers visibly weighed down the sad procession in blue that conducted the dead policeman toward his final rest. Racism did not require racists. Racism did not require a racist. Let me say that again. Racism did not require a racist. Racism did not require a racist. It required only that in the split second before firing the fatal shot, the white officer entered the twilight zone of America's racecraft.
That was deep.
Again, racism does not require you to be a racist. It does not require you to believe in the fundamental faculties that you are superior. But the narrative, the existing body of images, the existing body of policies that reinforce the images, the policies that continue to produce the outcomes and the behaviors that produce the images, that bloop, in one motherfucking snap second, blah, you have committed an act that reproduces and enforces in a narrative on both ends. Because guess what, white people? Like I said last time, them black tokens that y'all love so much are only working against you because they keep and reinforce racism. Get rid of the black token because the black token will only use you to sell to us oppression. I don't like all of y'all. It's not about liking all of y'all. I don't think it's racist for a white person to say they want to marry in their group. I don't think it's a racist for a white person to say, I don't like a black person. Now, your reasoning, your context may make you racist. Because I don't like some white people. I don't like some black people. But guess what? It's reinforced because you have people willing to sell and perpetuate in the narrative. So yes, black people, you can be racist too. And if anybody want any smoke, on my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, The Black Anglo-Saxon is my Twitter. And just type in my last name, Lesesne, Lesesne. If you want smoke on Facebook, or go to Gilded Sages, the page. Just type something. I welcome all smoke. Because yes, y'all niggas is terrible too. Mm-hmm. And I'm tired of it. I think a lot of people are tired of it because we want to keep talking about what white people do and we can't say shit to each other. We can't say nothing about, oh yeah, y'all want to keep complaining about a narrative that's being pushed. But here we got rappers just rapping about wild, ignorant shit. And we got black people crying, oh my God, why can't we get anything else better and different? Because y'all keep buying the bullshit.
Al Sharpton.
Hold on. Everybody want to keep crying about the NFL. Why the fuck do the NFL still exist? I'll say less. So the next, and again, this book is Racecraft, The Soul of Inequity, Inequality in American Life. And I'm gonna read into another conversation. Let me see. Okay, here we go. So, black people everywhere do not see alike. Persons of Africa and the Caribbean may not see what Afro-Americans see. Visualize the Afro-American professor again, this time in Washington, D.C., en route to Union Station on a rainy, foggy day in 2008, flagging down a taxi. She is safely on board when the African driver spots a soaked white traveler loaded with baggage. He glances at her through the rearview mirror to ask if it will be all right to pick up the other traveler as well. Why, of course. He pulls to the curb and proposes. The traveler jumps. His face, the very portrait of fear. Portrait of fear. No, thank you. No, thank you. Getting underway again, the driver again glances in the mirror. What was wrong with him? At the professor's explanation, he saw a car full of Black people. The driver exclaims, his face registering shocked understanding. Asks later, where is he from? He says, I am Egyptian. And not instantly seeing the reality that both the white and the Black American did. The African cab driver qualifies as a Martian too. Martian, AKA alien.
That's heavy.
Black and white people, as I've said here, Black and white are inherent concepts of America. It was a creation of America to justify a business endeavor by the name of chattel slavery. Race is a business. It is a business model. Black and white are products of a business model. We are more intrinsically interwoven in our identity than we would like to believe. You cannot have Blackness without whiteness. Those two things need each other to exist. It is why an immigrant, Black or white, can come and work toward whiteness. Because why? It is a social construct. It has no bound. It can be expounded on. It can be expanded. Hence why we have, like I have said, POC and BIPOC, which are another formations of the laziness of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants given out to the world because they don't want to do the work of disaggregation. And everybody buys it because policies and institutions. So Yale and Harvard and Bernard and all of these other, oh, it's BIPOC. We're on BIPOC now. What the fuck is a BIPOC? BIPOC, Asian, AAPI. I saw a goddamn Twitter thing today. Check out, again, my Twitter. They disaggregated the AAPI community. Bangladesh, Indonesia, the whole nine. That's what we need. Because AAPI is racist. Because let me say this again. It removes, diminishes, and erases and aggregates a narrative that allows nefarious actors to pick and choose when they want to use it. AKA, as we just read, the double standard. So that's all I'm gonna touch on for today. I appreciate everybody that came out and listened to us have this conversation. Can you please share this? Can you please like this? Can you please help us elevate so we can have a conversation at a higher level and touch many more people? And so people can call in who disagree, who don't, who agree, whatever. That's how you can help me. That's how you can help us. Again, you want solutions? Pick 2 organizations. Pick 3 community meetings at your local level and join them. Participate. If you got kids, take care of them. Raise your families. That's it. But I thank all of y'all. We appreciate y'all for another eavesdrop. It was love. Great conversation. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Saturday. Be safe out here. Stay COVID free. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. And we're going to catch our beautiful folk on the next time, on the next weekend. And thank you.
Jazz